Okay,
Okay, that one's gone. Okay,
hello.
just turned 7 o'clock, Lily, so you're good.
Yeah, we're recording now. We're live.
Okay.
Uh, thank you everyone for joining. We're going to give everyone a minute or two of come into the room, and then we'll begin our webinar. Thank you for your patience. You can just let me know if we got what number that is, because I can't see you anymore.
Who, me?
Yeah, I can't see you because I'm on presenter mode.
Gotcha. Okay. Let me just close this up here.
Are the numbers looked?
Oh, we are at 16 right now.
Okay.
Give them it's only 6:02, so give them maybe a couple more minutes.
Holding steady.
Yeah, so far so good. We're at 16. Yeah.
All right. Well, how about we can just start?
Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. I want to thank everyone for joining us today in our continuation of our safety webinar series. My name is Lily Calderon, Director of Health and Safety Programs for the IU. I'm joined today by Dave Wysocki, MTEF's National Safety Director. Under the BAC umbrella, some of our work is performed at heights. Performing work at heights can be dangerous, and we can use different safety controls to help mitigate the hazard. We often use mast climbers to help us achieve our work. Mast climbers or mast climbing work platforms are a safe and efficient way for workers to reach greater heights. They can carry much heavier loads than traditional scaffolding and are used to position workers and materials at great heights. But we always want to keep in mind that while mast climbers are safer and more efficient, there are hazards that we need to be aware of to continue to remain safe while working on these platforms. We always want to keep safety first. One life lost is a life too many. While in previous webinars, we have spoken about proper fall arrest systems, today we want to discuss several mast climber incidents so we are aware of the hazards and what we can do to prevent them. Dave Wysocki will go through some of NIOSH's fatality assessment and control evaluations, or also referred to as FACE. NIOSH is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and NIOSH's FACE program studies fatal occupational injuries and offers recommendations to protect workers from similar incidents. These are available through NIOSH's website, which I will share the link in the chat. Before we begin today's webinar, I would like to go over some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available for viewing on our website, bacweb.org/safety, as well as all past webinars. We will have a question and answer section at the conclusion of our presentation. Please use the Q&A box to submit questions during the presentation and or at the end. We'll get to them in the Q&A session. And as always, please feel free to submit any recommendations for future webinars. Thank you all, and with that, we will begin. Dave, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lily. Just at the bottom of my name, Lily, it is, I don't know if you need to black something out on your computer. I got the gray box.
Oh,
So,
I think it's
nope. No, I got two gray boxes.
I'm not sure why. Sorry.
No, that's right. still there, so it's blocking the whole
If-
bottom of the screen. So
Second. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I'm going to reshare. Sorry, everyone. Technical issues. I think it might be because it's transcribing. There we go. Let me reshare. Again, apologies, everyone. Is that better?
no, it's worse. Oh, the top one's gone, the middle one's gone, just the bottom now.
I'm not seeing anything else.
Okay, well, right across there's a 2-inch line that's going across the whole bottom of the screen.
Are you able to see your content?
Yeah, but it might interfere with some of the pictures, but we'll go forward and see. Yeah, for some reason it's right down at the bottom. I wonder if you want me to try putting it on my screen and
You want? Sorry, everyone.
Yeah, hang on here. Let me pull it up first thing.
Our apologies.
It's happened before. Let's hopefully it doesn't do the same thing that happened with me. 1 second. Sorry, taking a little longer. 1 second, Lily. Let me just move this out of the way.
Sorry, everyone. It was working earlier. As we all know, computers like to have their own mind.
Can you see all that, Lily? 1 second. How's that, Lily?
And all we see is your Zoom, post Zoom.
Oh, Jesus. Why isn't it? Hold on. Clicked on the right one for share.
Here's the link.
Share. I clicked on the screen. All right, let me try this one. Hang on.
While we're waiting, I put the link for NIOSH's face program in the chat box if you'd like to take a look at it.
How's that, Lily?
You're in presenter view.
Oh, my Lord. This might not be working. We might have to go back to yours.
Just switch it to presenter view.
How's that now?
That you're in regular point.
I switched it. I did switch
Sorry,
it.
guys. We've apologized profusely.
Yeah, I switched it to presenter view. Nope, it's not. You're just gonna have to do it to yours. For some reason, it's not switching over. So I stopped sharing. Put yours back on. We'll have to muscle through it.
Yep. Slideshow.
We got a couple on the bottom. There you go. Yeah, the one on the bottom is really big. If you get rid of that one, we'll be all set.
Trying to move it. That's it. All right.
All right. So it got worse. So sorry everybody for the delay. We did have a practice session. Everything was going good. But moving on forward with like the Mast Climber Safety Series, we are now a little over a year past, or year and a half past ANSI's A92-23, the Mast Climber ANSI standard, where OSHA, as of August of 2024, they gave it 1 year to go into effect, and then they were going to use the A92 standard to start citing contractors. So we're, like I say, we're about 7 months past that. I haven't heard a whole lot of OSHA citations that where they were citing it, but I did get a few calls from some contractors that they are looking at that standard and speaking with OSHA. So part of the agenda, just we're going to kind of follow up on some of what was changed in the A92.9 standard. We're going to go over 2 Mast Climber incidents, case studies 1 and 2. Just for privacy, we're not going to say contractors' names or if they're union or non-union. We're just going to talk about the incidents and what went wrong and how they can be avoided. And then there's going to be a couple other incidents that happened recently within the past couple of years. We're just going to go over some of those. There's no case studies on them, and then we'll do a summary about what we presented. Next slide, Lily.
Jesus.
All right, so that, like I say, this was approved by ANSI March 1st of 2023. Went into effect a year later, 2024. So, like I say, we're about a year out into 2025 here. Some of the changes that we added and changed. Next slide, Lily. So operator training. This is a big one. According to manufacturer, anybody that's on that scaffold needs to be trained. So we do now have it in there in the operator training under 7.4.10 that when your employer directs you or anybody to operate that Mast Climber, he has to make sure that that individual has been trained according to the manufacturer's instructions, the manual, and pretty much anybody that's on that Mast Climber should be trained. That is one of the big talking points we are pushing, that anybody that steps foot on there, especially our members, when we're on that Mast Climber, when that Mast Climber is coming down, we're usually the ones that are riding it down to fill in the ties. So we are pushing that everybody on that Mast Climber should be trained as a user / operator. There is some definitions that they say occupant, but as far as us, as this is one of the scaffolds that we're on most of the time, I would like to see everybody trained as a user, and we'll get into some of the incidents that had happened and why they happened. Next slide, Lily. So with training, one of the big things is documentation. So as far as your employer giving you the training on this, he also has to keep the records of training. So if something should happen, going with the proof of training, obviously who trained them. That is one of the big things when someone gets hurt. The first thing OSHA asks is, who the competent person was and how was he trained. Next slide, Lily. So training, so only personnel who have received general instruction regarding inspection, application, and operations of the Mast Climber work platforms, including recognition and avoidance of hazards associated with their operations, shall operate the Mast Climbing work platform. Such items covered shall include, but are not limited to, the following issues. Next slide, Lily. So obviously, operating manual, anybody that is on that Mast Climber should have read the manufacturer's mast climbing manual for that piece of equipment. The competent person should did a pre-start inspection. Anything that's associated with problems or malfunctions affecting that, who is going to be responsible to fix that, which should be the competent person designated by the contractor. Stability of the mast climber, ground conditions, make sure all the decals and placards on that mast climber are easily, readily and available to read. We get mortar on them. If they get torn, they should be replaced, because without those, you wouldn't know the limitations of that mast climber. The workplace inspections, we're going to talk about that in a little bit about, there's annual inspections, there's weekly inspections, there's monthly inspections, and we'll get into that in a couple slides later. Safety rules and regulations, who has the authority to operate, and that comes from the employer, is giving them authorization to operate. Operator warnings and instructions if something should go wrong, or how are they going to correct it, and who do they see to correct that? Responsibility of the owners, user, and operator set forth in the standard, and the actual operation of the mast climber. Under the direction of a qualified person, the trainee shall operate the mast climber for a sufficient period of time to demonstrate proficiency in the actual operation of the mast climber work platform. Next slide, Lily. So when we talk about inspection, there are requirements in the standard for inspection, going over just hazards associated with mast climbers or any scaffold. We want to make sure that before we turn that scaffold over to the user operators and put our members up on there, it should go through a handover examination. We're lifting people hundreds of feet in the air with these pieces of equipment. Oh, well, there you go. Sorry about that. It's essential that these checks are carried out. And this is where when I do the training, I tell everybody to be your own competent person. So you got a full inspection. There's a checklist with pretty much every manufacturer out there once you build the scaffold, before you go and man it, your competent person should be doing the daily inspection, pre-test, the pre-inspection before anybody steps foot on it. Daily inspection, the first thing in the morning, there should be a pre-check list that the competent person is going to go through, make sure the bolts are all torqued down, the ground hasn't changed, look at the safety dogs, make sure they've moved freely. Once that he gives it the okay, then we should be able to put our members up in that scaffold. Some manufacturers got a weekly inspection, some have a 6-week inspection, 6-month. Some say frequent, some say frequent is depending on who's doing it. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a day. Everybody's definition of frequent is different. So a few things that are inspected, obviously all the components, make sure they're tightened and secured, make sure they're torqued to manufacturer's instructions. Make sure that there's no corrosion cracks on any of the metal parts. Test the braking system, like I say, the safety dogs. And the reason we're saying this, because some of these incidents that we're going to be talking about in the next couple slides happened because this stuff wasn't done. There was rusted components, and we'll get into that a little more. Next slide, Lily. So this is going to be the first case study that we're going to talk about. This was actually a college dorm. Unfortunately, 3 people lost their lives. This accident happened while they were dismantling and lowering the scaffold to the roof. Most mast climber accidents happen in the dismantling stages. So it's real important that whoever's tearing that down knows the rules and regulations from what the manufacturers recommend. Next slide, Lily. So you can see that this scaffold was being used in the winter. They did have winter protection on it. The accident actually happened on the other side of the building from the slide you're seeing here. You can go to the next slide, Lily. So as they were removing the anchors that fastened the mast to the building, they got to the final one, and once they removed the final brace, compromising the stability and design of the platform, one, they not knowingly knew that they overloaded the scaffold. So as they were bringing the mast down, they were putting the towers on the scaffold. And when you read the owner's manual, you're supposed to distribute the weight evenly across the mast. Unfortunately, they were putting it all to one side, so it was already leaning towards the street. Next slide, Lily. So once they took those towers off and they put it on top of the mast, it was definitely over the weight capacity of that mast climber. And then when they went to take off that last tie, which was tight, the laborer was unbolting it, and he took his hammer out and he popped the tie out of the wall. And when that happened, because it had its winter protection still on it, the mast climber became a big sail up in the air and started rocking back and forth, and it fell over. Next slide, Lily.
And just want to add, if many of you or if any of you have had instances where you've been on that end where you're helping undo the ties on a mast climber, you know how tight that can get, and when you pop that pin, you can feel that weight shift and push back. I mean, I know me personally being on a mast climber like that and feeling how much it sways is scary. So, being mindful of the weight capacities and distributing the weight across as we dismantle, it's key.
So 2 workers fell with the scaffold 14 stories onto an automobile sitting in traffic. So the 2 workers and the person in the car were deceased. 2 pedestrians also got hit by flying debris. There was another laborer, next slide. He was able to jump into the wall and hang on where they took the tie off, and he was able to survive. But that hole is where the last tie was. When it started to go, he actually leaped into the hole. Next slide. So here's just the tower that fell. The mass and the unbolted towers landed down in the street below. And when they started doing their investigation, they found out that the first wall tie on the mast was twice the maximum required height from the base as the manufacturer specified. Next slide, Lily. So putting, all those towers on there and adding the winter protection as a sail on there caused the failure. And on top of that, that cantilever beam where that tower was connected to was not able to support the load imposed on it. So when you're tearing these mast climbers down, there's a maximum weight you can put on there. Once you hit that maximum weight, you need to ride that mast climber down, take that weight off, ride it back up, and then continue taking it down. Unfortunately, that was not the case in here. The next slide, please, Lily. So this is where the power unit landed, right on that car. And that was the other deceased victim there. So just to go over what had happened. Next slide, Lily. The first tie was twice the maximum required height from the manufacturer as per design. The total weight of that was 5,400 pounds, overloading the cantilever beams. It was not inspected. They had no record of being inspected by the competent person. Most of the citations listed lack of training, and as they were tearing that down, when they get to the ties, no one was wearing fall protection because you're sliding those plank back to go past the ties. So no one had fall protection on it. And the manufacturer recommended when you're riding that down to take the winter protection off while you're dismantling it. So next slide, Lily. So with the OSHA regulations, they recited multiple scaffold components must support their own weight and 4 times their maximum intended load. Guys, ties, and braces shall be installed according to the scaffold manufacturer's recommendation. Scaffold components shall not be loaded in excess of their maximum intended load. And that's, like I say, they, without being trained and not knowing, they just kept stacking the towers on one side of the platform, and that's what caused the failure. Scaffold and scaffold components shall be inspected for visible defects by the competent person before each work shift and after any occurrence which could affect the scaffold structure integrity. Next slide, Lily. The scaffold shall be erected, moved, dismantled, and altered only under the supervision and direction of a competent person qualified in scaffold erection, moving, dismantling, and alteration. Such activity shall be performed only by experienced and trained employees selected for such work by the competent person. And each employee on the scaffold more than 10 feet above a lower level shall be protected from falling to that lower level. So now with Mast Climber, as long as the guardrails are on and it's fully enclosed, technically you don't need fall protection. But since they were dismantling it, sliding plank back, that's why they got cited for the fall protection, not wearing fall protection. So, all right, next slide, please, Lily. So with this case study, this is another one that happened. Looking at the picture there, you can see the 2 bathrooms, the porta-johns, and the scaffold right in front of that. And at the top of the picture, you can see some towers that actually were thrown once that tower came down. The top of that platform was it was about the 9th floor when this one happened. If you can go to the next slide, Lily. So there's the towers from the 6th through the 9th floor in a circle on the top. The one below, those were the towers that were put on the mast as they were tearing it down. And we're going to revisit this picture later on in the slide, just to kind of give you what's going on and then see actually what happened and how far the stuff projectiled. Next slide, Lily. So the most critical consideration in this, in the stability of the Mast Climber, is the ties. So we talked about that in the last one. They didn't put the ties in the correct place. This one, from the time of the assembly when they put it together, the distance the ties did not conform to the manufacturer's recommendation, and their recommendation was not to exceed 40 feet. The first tie in there was at 47 feet. The second tie, from the first tie to the second tie, was at another 47 feet, which when we talk about the accident, you'll see that that was not according to manufacturer's recommendations. Next slide, Lily. So as they were bringing it down, when they got to the 9th floor, it was all the way up. They had 11 floors as they were bringing it down. So 11, 10, and 11, all those masts were put on the back of the scaffold. Wasn't evenly distributed. You know, putting them on the front to balance it out, they put them all to the back of the scaffold. And in between each floor, so from the 10th to 11th, it was actually 5 sections of the mast. So as they were being removed, they were placed on the back of the platform deck. So as they proceeded down to the 9th floor, next slide, Lily. They went down to the 9th floor, was where the mast was when the accident happened. They went to go take the tie out, and as they knocked the tie out because it was tight, all that weight on the back pulled it out away from the building, and it went crashing down. So this tie here is the one on the 6th floor, which they found in their case study that there were no bolts in that mast that connected from the sixth floor up, and that's why it pulled apart. Next slide, Lily. So going back to what just happened here, so you're seeing so there's the mass from the sixth to the ninth floor. That's where no bolts were in on the bottom. The one on the right there next to the curb by the light pole, that was one of them that came off the back of the platform. So next slide, Lily. So going back to the manufacturer's recommendation, this is their maximum spacing between tie anchors was 40 feet. And so their first two ties were 47 feet apart, not following the manufacturer's recommendation. So the next slide. So the unsupported height of the mast at 47 feet. So the total weight imposed on that platform was 4,260 pounds. There were missing bolts on the sixth floor, which contributed to the accident. They were overloading the platform, and they also didn't follow. They built the mast climber in a non-standard formation. So in order to do something like that, you would have to get the manufacturer's an engineer involved to have them change, the way it could be set up, which they did not do. So that was, and the way they had it set up, it didn't meet they were using the improper load chart, which I'm not sure if they knew that they overloaded the scaffold according to the study. They felt that they were unaware of the weight that they were putting on there. The total weight on there was, the maximum was 3,000 pounds. They were almost 1,300 pounds overloaded, all towards the back of the scaffold. So when they hit that last tie, when they took it out, down it went. So the erection of the mast climber platform and its mast was improperly done, because the lateral ties exceeded the manufacturer's maximum permitted height. The failure of the bolts on the sixth floor connecting the lower towers to the upper towers triggered the failure. And that, like I say, being a non-standard configuration, the contractor did not consult with the manufacturer to obtain the corresponding load chart for the modified configuration. So next slide, Lily. So when we go back to the OSHA regulations, similar to the case study before, scaffold components must support their weight at 4 times their maximum intended load. The guys tied shall be installed according to the scaffold manufacturer's recommendation. The scaffold components shall not be loaded in excess of their maximum intended load or rated capacity, whichever is less. And it wasn't inspected by the competent person before each work shift or after each occurrence that would affect the scaffold structural integrity. Next slide. So scaffold shall be erected, moved, and dismantled or altered under the supervision and direction of the competent person in scaffold erection. Such activity shall be performed only by experienced and trained employees selected for such work by the competent person. Each employee on that scaffold more than 10 feet above a lower level shall be protected from falling to a lower level. So two accidents, 2 fatalities. Pretty much the OSHA regulations were the same for both incidents. So going back to, your employer, one of the big things that we're seeing, when we do the training portion of it, is that the contractors think because they went to the union for training that the employers wiped their hands in it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We do hazard awareness training when you go to the training requirements under 1926 454 A and B. We do part A. We do the hazards associated with it, electrical falls. And part B, that's where it hits. This scaffold shall be erected, moved, dismantled, or altered only under the supervision of and direction of a competent person qualified in scaffold erection, moving, dismantling, and alteration. So that's where we wipe our hands as far as being responsible for it. We're giving them the hazards associated with scaffold, falls, electrical. But when you get to the load capacity and stuff, that is one, we don't know what scaffold that contractor's using. You know, there's 700 different mast climbers out there, all kinds of different parts and components. We don't know which one we're using. We just follow what the standard says. You know, we teach to the standard. So unfortunately, that's where the big disconnect is with the contractors thinking just because they took our training at the training center at the union that they're trained. They are to a point. There's site-specific training, different types of scaffold, you know, and that all falls on the employer. Next slide, Lily, please. So this one, this was caused by the hook not being engaged when you're on a mast climber. There's two hooks that actually hook onto the mast, which pulls it up into a second stationary hook that locks it into place. This was person operating it did not take the time to walk over there and look at it. The hook did not engage, and when it came down, it actually sheared off the safety dog. And the only reason it stopped is because it actually wedged itself on the other tower. So could have been catastrophic. There were three people on there. One slid all the way down. Thank God for the winter protection. He didn't get thrown off the scaffold. Next slide, Lily. So this one was operator error. So this one was seen right from, you know, the expressway. Everybody can see it. So they put some lulls up there to kind of hold it. They had to do some special rigging, getting, you know, 3-foot cutting torch to cut this apart to take it down because it was wedged so bad. But like I said, thank God nobody was hurt on that. Next slide, Lily. So there, that's what you saw from the expressway. Like I say, thank God that plastic was there. It saved somebody's life. But unfortunately, operator error on this one. Next slide, Lily. This one was a incident with 3 fatalities. 3 workers fell 70 feet. Going back to the second case study, there were 4 people on that scaffold. 3 ended up dying. 1 was lucky. He landed on top of one of the porta-johns, and that's what saved his life. I forgot to mention that. But on this one, unfortunately, this one came down and it wedged itself. That blue tower there, that's a tower crane. It actually pushed the tower crane away from the building, sheared off some of the ties. This accident could have been a lot worse, but 3 people on that scaffold were killed. 2 others were injured. What I can say about this one is that the scaffold manufacturer had a engineered drawing for this job. And it came down to the competent person making a decision of using a rusted part. And it affected the structural integrity of the scaffold. And unfortunately, that piece of equipment that he used was not able to support 4 times its intended load, and it came crashing down. So one of the other citations I could say is that they failed to inspect the scaffold and components for visible defects prior to each shift. And also another one was it wasn't constructed according to the designed manufactured by the qualified person. So unfortunately, this accident could have been avoided if they would have followed the manufacturer's, or not the manufacturer's, the engineer design drawing and not bring in a different part and inspecting it. And going back to the inspection, that all goes back to the training of the individual by that competent person. Was that competent person qualified to do the training? And like I say, this one could have been a lot worse. It could have knocked that tower crane over, and probably would have had another fatality for sure. The crane operator in there. Next slide, Lily. So really want to push, training. You want to make sure you're trained on any type of scaffold you're using. As you can see on this one, those mud sills that are holding up those jacks, it's not proper. It's not according to manufacturer's recommendation. This is just another accident waiting to happen. Next slide. So in summary, most mast climbers accidents happen when dismantling. And like I say, most of our dismantling of mast climbers, the bricklayers on that mast climber bring it down, because as we take that tile, we're either patching a piece of brick, stone, we're patching that hole in there, so we got to make sure that our members are trained on that. Do not exceed the maximum intended load. So depending on the type of scaffold you're using, whether it's a mast climber or a swing stage or pipe scaffold, you got to be able to see those stickers and decals, what that scaffold is rated at. Use fall protection when moving plank to remove the ties. That is one of the big things. When you're sliding those plank over, you should be tied off at all times. Once you go past that tie and those plank are put back into place, then you can remove your fall protection. Remove winter enclosures before lowering, and make sure workers are trained properly. Next slide. Follow manufacturer's recommended tie schedule. That was both accidents. They exceeded the manufacturer's maximum recommendation for ties, so which contributed to the accident also. Make sure all bolts are installed and torqued to manufacturer's recommendation. This is talking to some OSHA compliance officers. When they come on a mast climber job, the first thing they ask the competent person is, can I see your torque wrench? And he said 9 times out of 10, most of them pull out their DeWalt impact or Milwaukee impact driver, saying that that's their torque wrench, which a lot of those over torque all those bolts, stretch them. So recommendation is make sure if it says their torque, make sure you have torque wrenches on site. Also inspect the scaffold daily prior to use and follow manufacturer's inspection schedules. So any question? Thank you. Sorry for the slow start and trying to work out the bugs, but like I say, this is our first of many series. I believe our next series is going to be on ties. And we're going to go through that. Is there any questions in the chat, Lily?
Yeah, before we get to that, I just wanted to add, as Dave mentioned, this is part of our real tuning into where some of our incidents are happening with our own membership. And, we've had a few in the last few years of members either being injured or unfortunately losing their lives from mast climber incidents. And that's why we really are focusing in and really honing in on the fact that we should be training our members. They are on mast climbers. If they're going to be on them, they should know the ins and outs. They don't need to know everything, obviously, as an erector, but they should know an erector dismantler, but they should know what it all entails, so that when they get up onto that mast climber and they can visually see things that may be wrong, they can spot it and tell that competent person. Sometimes the competent person might not see it right away, and someone else sees it, they can take care of that problem. And just being aware that when we are lowering our mast climbers to get ties off, we do move those planks around, and, making sure that everyone's clear of that and they don't get back on that working platform before everything's put back together. I have personally been on that working platform and just scooted down a little too far and teeter-tottered. Luckily, I'm still here. But that's an accident waiting to happen. Just keep in mind of all the little things that happen while we are on it at working, by building up, but also when we come down and we are patching in, helping with the dismantling portion of it. If we are going to operate the mast climber, making sure that we hook on to the mast, making sure that we're secured, even when you're done for the day, making sure that all that is put into place, so that you don't come back and something happened overnight. And I really think making sure that we inspect daily, especially when you have we're getting really crazy weather sometimes, winds, rain, depending, snow, making sure that all those things that the weather that hasn't put any other effects onto that scaffold. So making sure that we do those daily inspections. And sometimes it might be just, you get off the scaffold for an hour or two because it was raining, making sure when you get back up there to make sure that you are inspecting it again. This is not just the life of for you, but this is for the crew that you're working with. It's everyone on that mast climber. Yeah. And I will get to the Q&A.
Yeah, and a little more on that. I mean, these are only 2 incidents that we really covered. 2 case studies that are out probably in the last 7 months. There's been 4 mast climber incidents that I didn't even talk about. You didn't hear about them because no one really got hurt. They slid down after finding out what happened. They got to the tie. Their hammer drill, the battery was dead, so they didn't put the tie in it. And unfortunately, this mast climber tipped over. Thank God everybody's kind of slid down with the material. No one got injured, so you didn't hear about that one. There was another one where a couple people got pretty seriously injured. Probably never work again in their life. It's happening out there. Like Lily says, job sites change every second. A block goes in, a pipe gets laid, or brick gets laid, an electrician puts a pipe in, a plumber puts a pipe. That job site is constantly changing as the weather does. And one of these had winter protection on it. Thank God we're out of the winter right now. We're going into summer. But you got these storms that are popping up. Got to see what the wind, the wind speed, when can I get on that scaffold or get off that scaffold once the wind speeds pick up. So there's a lot to it, and it all goes back to training. Your contractor needs to train you as far as site specific, scaffold specific. Like I say, we can do all the training at the training centers and give you all the hazards, but when it comes down to it, the contractor has to give you site specific training. Because we do scaffold training on concrete floors. We're not out on a job site where there's a plumber dug a hole and we put a mast climber over that hole. So it's different. Hazards are the same, but it's different because of the job sites. So
thanks, Dave. We do have a question here. It says, how do you get a copy of the ANSI standard?
So all the ANSI standards are for purchase on the ANSI website. I believe the A92.9 is, I want to say $125. Can't get them for free. I get a copy for free because I'm on the committee. I can definitely show it to you if anybody wants to see it. I can't reproduce it, but I can show you the standard. And it, like I say, we're in the process of updating it. Right now we have the A92.9, which is what the picture we showed earlier, but there's also going to be an A, B, and C. So it's going to be for design, and then there's going to be user, operator / training. So we're going to break it down even further according to just the A92.9. So there is going to be an A, B, and C. The problem is it just takes so long to push it along. You know, we have folks from the other side of the aisle that don't like some of the changes or the wording we're putting in there, but we, as a, you know, union and organization, we need to push forward and push for these safety regulations. So,
Yeah.
but they are for purchase on the ANSI website.
Another question came in earlier. You said you should be tied off when moving plank around to get around ties. Are there tie-offs on mast climbers that can be used?
Hydromobile, I'm just using that as one manufacturer, will let you tie off to the tower. It depends on the manufacturer. As far as tying off, you can tie off to the tower. And the reason you're tying off, you're gonna have an SRL on, you know, a self-retracting line, or your lanyard is not gonna have a shock absorber on there. So basically what it's doing, it's allowing you to get to that plank to move it. It's not allowing you to fall. So depending on the manufacturer, right now, I know Hydromobile, they will allow you to tie off to the mast, the tower, to do that. But like I say, every manufacturer is different. If you're in front of a building, you might have to drop a lifeline down from the roof and have just a lifeline down that you could tie off just for that reason, for that purpose when you're moving those plank.
We have another one. Does each person that is working on a mast climber need to be trained, or just the supervisor that sets up the scaffold? You mentioned site-specific training. Each site would need this to be done. Do you know if the safety standard differs in Canada?
They do differ in Canada, I will say that, but a lot of the mast climber, and that's what we're working on right now. We have on the A92 standard committee, we do have representation from Canada, you know, so they follow the CAS. Hydromobile's from Canada, so we have some big players from Hydromobile. Freco, Francais from Freco, he's on there, they're from Canada. So yes, they're trying to get it across the board, you know, so everybody's following the same rules, but because of the difference in the safety organization, we have OSHA, and unfortunately, different provinces up there have different rules and regulations. It's gonna be, so in the standard, they will mention it, and they'll probably refer to the different types of standards through Canada or the US. And it'll just be, you'd have to follow what your organization is. As far as trained, anybody that steps foot on that mast climber should be trained, not just supervisors. And that's why right now the OSHA standard does not have a mast climber specific standard. They use the regular scaffold standard. So they're the reason, like with this A92.9, we're hoping, because mast climbers, there's a whole different ball game. We can get a whole nother section, a standard on just mast climbers itself, not be put in with the scaffold standard. It'll take time. It's going to take you know, it takes a long time to get a scaffold standard pass or a standard pass through OSHA, but that's our goal, is to have its own separate standard just for mast climbers.
Yep. Well, I don't see any more questions in the queue. I want to thank Dave for your presentation. The work that you do in and day out, you know, it's important, and everyone here for coming on to this webinar. And I will say that if you want these slides, I know it was kind of difficult with sharing the screen today. If you want those slides of the presentation, please email me. I put my email into the chat. If not, it's lcalderon@bacweb.org. I can get you those slides. Again, I apologize for our technical difficulties in the beginning, but I do think each and every one of you to taking the time today to be on this safety webinar. And for those that have been on our previous webinars, thank you again for coming on, and please share the content. Like I said, these are recorded and will be available online. Share with members, contractors. The more information that we get out there, hopefully the safer that our members will be on the job site. With that, I don't know if Dave, you have any closing statement?
No, I put my email in the chat too. If anybody's got any questions, I am the National Safety Director for IMTEF. On the training end of it, any questions, comments, problems, reach out to me. I have a wealth of resources out there, being on the ANSI committee with, the big players, Hydromobile, Fraco, Step Up, Access, B Access. Lily and I are on all those standards, so we meet on a regular basis. Without our voice on those committees, we won't get these standards passed. So we'll continue to fight. Our goal is to make sure that every one of our members goes home at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Hear, hear. Again, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.